Yes. Hi, Yasar. How are you? I hope you are all well. Friends, starting from this lesson, we will be introducing Java. First of all, I would like to point out this point. I have been providing software training for a long time. So, I have been providing software training since 2004. I entered the industry in 2000. I've been in this industry for almost 25 years. I've also had, humbly speaking, hundreds of students in the field of software, friends. Maybe it's even surpassed 1,000. So, for those who are just starting out or want to get training to help with their school courses, let me tell you, you're in the right place. Of course, my students will also watch these videos after I upload them to YouTube. They can also leave comments under the video and share information about me with you, friends. First of all, I want to say this again. Let me say it right at the beginning so later you don't say, "What is this teacher talking about?" Don't say that, friends. When learning any language, it doesn't have to be Java. You first need to learn the logic behind it. And by logic here, I'm not talking about ones and zeros. I'm talking about the logic of the programming language you want to use and learn. In all of these lessons, I will be explaining the logic behind things to you, friends. That's why this is a principle for me. Everyone explains code. I mean, you might have taken a lot of courses on YouTube. You might have followed many channels, but still felt like something was missing. You might not have been able to learn programming. The reason for this is that they don't explain the logic behind it. That's why, as much as possible, I will also be explaining to you how the code I write works in the background, friends. Now, first of all, we need to understand a bit about how Java works, friends. So, first of all, I want to say this. Why did Java become so widespread and why did people start using it? Now, Java can run smoothly on different operating systems, and a single piece of code written in Java can be executed on all operating systems, friends. Also, thanks to the special memory structure that Java uses, it enables secure coding. For all these reasons, Java has been a powerful programming language for enterprises for many years. Nowadays, it's used in many startups. It's also used in large-scale companies. Today, the platforms you use like Getir, Gitigidia, Hepsiburada, Trengil, they all use Java on their backends, friends. Java is used in banking applications and fintech applications because it's powerful and secure, friends. All right. That's why I think for the next 4 or 5 years, Java's star will keep shining brightly, friends. Now, first, we need to understand the basic working principle of Java. That's why I made this drawing for you, and I'm going to explain a bit about what it is. By the way, we'll talk about the details of this again and again later, friends. Look, some people might come and say, this doesn't have enough detail, or this is missing, and so on. We'll talk about all these details down to the finest point. But right now, for beginners, that much detail would just be overwhelming. This is actually one of the biggest mistakes people make. Let the student code first. Let them enjoy the process of coding, and then we can talk about the details. So here, we're going to quickly talk about Java's basics, actually, its life cycle for running, friends. In the first part, right here, you, the developers, will be doing the coding, friends. Then, we have an application called a compiler, which is run with the Java command. This takes the code you've written. These are just plain text files with the .java extension. Nothing fancy, friends. You know how you open up Notepad and scribble your name or something like that? Yeah, just think of that, but with a .java extension, you just write text inside it, like this. I'll explain what all of these are, one by one, later on. We'll learn all of them as we go along. So the basic idea here is that this text, this content, gets processed by the Java compiler, guys. After it's processed, it gets converted into ones and zeros, into byte codes. These byte codes are a code system that the JVM can understand, execute, and run. Thanks to the compiler, these get turned into your runner Java, into runner classes. This way, the code you write can run anywhere. In other words, it can be transferred to the structure called the JVM and executed anywhere. After that, no matter which computer the JVM is installed on, Windows, Mac, Linux, it doesn't matter, this code is run on that system. This is the key part here, guys. This was the part that made JVM powerful and set Java apart from others for years. JVM stands for Java Virtual Machine. It creates a virtualization layer. In other words, on top of any operating system, it creates an environment where it can run itself. You can think of it like this. Using analogies helps. It makes it more memorable. You've probably seen in movies, there are Chinatowns in America, right? People gather their own culture, their own people there, and establish a neighborhood. Now, that place has become Chinatown. From the signs to the culture, to the way they speak, what happened? They created an ecosystem for themselves there. In the same way, the JVM creates its own ecosystem so it can run its own code, and it works wherever it is, guys. So if it's on Windows, it runs on Windows. If it's on Linux, it runs on Linux. If it's on Mac, it runs on Mac. And for us to be able to write Java code, we'll first need to install the JVM. Of course, we'll talk about how to install and download this in the next video, but there's something called the Java JDK. We'll download and install that. Once it's installed, it doesn't matter which machine you're using, so you can install it on Windows, Mac, or Linux, all of them. It sets up a JVM on top of that, and your code runs on it, guys. Alright, now, let's get into the details of this. So, there's also the detail of how the JVM works. You can see it in more detail here. After your code is compiled by the compiler, your classes are executed inside the JVM, the Java Virtual Machine, and this is a separate process. The variables you write, the methods, any external libraries you can think of, all of them are managed here. But this is a detailed part. Look, to really understand what's going on here, you first need to get some experience. Even if I explain this to you now, you'll forget it after a while. It won't stick in your memory. Because usually, after you've learned the basics and gotten comfortable, you start to wonder, I should know the details of this. How does it work in the background? When you reach the point where you're asking, what exactly is the JVM doing behind the scenes? That's when you learn these things. That's why my teaching approach is generally focused on helping students learn in a way that's lasting. For this reason, I explain the logic behind everything. But when the time comes, please don't rush. If you watch the videos step by step, I'll get you to the best level possible, friends. This is how we're making the basic start to Java. We'll continue with installation and coding. See you soon. Take care of yourselves.